Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all of you, both joining us on Zoom and on our viewers on YouTube, to the ASEAN-Korea Youth Academy webinar organized by the ASEAN-Korea Center, the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, and CSIS Indonesia. Today's event is also supported by the ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN University Network, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. My name is Ha Chae-gyun, and I'm the officer in charge of this program at the ASEAN-Korea Center. It's my pleasure to host today's event. Today's webinar will run from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. We'll begin with the opening session, followed by the award ceremony. At 2:30, we'll invite Ms. Rodora Babaran, the Director for Human Development of the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Department at the ASEAN Secretariat. From 3 p.m., we'll have 2 sessions of presentations and discussions on papers written by our contest winners. Now, at this time, I would like to invite His Excellency Lee Hyuk, Secretary General of the ASEAN-Korea Center, for his opening remarks.
Dr. Philip Vermont, Director of CSIS Indonesia, Dr. Huang Yin, who is here with us, Head of Center for ASEAN-India Studies of Korea National Diplomatic Academy, Ms. Rodora Babaran, Director for Human Development at the ASEAN Secretariat, Professor Kim Myung-jong, and Jo Won-duk, winners of the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest. Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic webinar. Under the normal circumstances, we would have invited you all to Seoul for a two-week workshop. For now, we will have to remain physically distanced and make the most out of our online discussions. But soon enough, with the rollout of vaccines, I'm sure we will be able to resume our vibrant exchanges. Before I go on to congratulate the winners, let me first thank our co-organizers, the Center for ASEAN-India Studies of KNDA and CSIS Indonesia. I'm also grateful for the support extended by the ASEAN Secretariat and the ASEAN University Network and the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This year, students were asked to write on the topic of ASEAN-Korea digital partnership in the post-COVID-19 era. We will all agree that the coronavirus pandemic accelerated the digital transformation of our societies. Within a year, we have witnessed dramatic changes in people's lives. You now take online classes instead of going to classrooms. You buy necessities on online shopping sites instead of going to the market. You watch movies on Netflix and other movie network instead of going to the cinema, and you make payments through digital banking instead of going to the bank. According to the Economy SEA 2020 report by Google, Temasek, and Bain & Company, 40 million new users joined the internet in the top 6 economies of ASEAN in 2020, bringing the total number of 400 million. This is 70% of the population in these 6 countries. As such, digital economy has now not only become an important part of our daily lives, but is expected to play a major role in the post-COVID-19 recovery, as underscored in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Korea, as ASEAN's strategic partner, has a long history of digital cooperation with Southeast Asian countries. For many years, the two regions worked together to develop and promote smart technology, ICT infrastructure, and human resources in the region. Just last Friday, the two regions held a digital ministers meeting where they agreed to work together towards building a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive ASEAN-Korea digital ecosystem. As winners of this year's essay contest, many of you presented some very creative and innovative ideas for enhancing ASEAN-Korea digital partnership. From e-commerce to virtual tourism, blockchain, and smart cities, you rightly pointed out how effective cooperation in these areas can lead to meaningful advances in ASEAN-Korea partnership. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to extend my sincere congratulations to our winners and also to all those who took part in the contest. This year, we received 112 very well-written essays, and I'm told that evaluation team had a hard time deciding the best ones. I was impressed by both the depth of your essays, by both the depth of your analysis and the comprehensiveness of your understanding of ASEAN-Korean relations. We are indeed proud of your achievements and I hope many of you will continue to contribute to promoting ASEAN-Korea relations in your future studies. I look forward to your presentations and discussions this afternoon and hope today's webinar will be a great success. In closing, I wish all of you good health and the very best in your future endeavors. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Now next, we have a congratulatory video message all the way from Jakarta by Dr. Philips Vermont, the Director of CSIS Indonesia.
On behalf of Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS Indonesia, I would like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center in Seoul for choosing us as a partner for two very important and interesting events. The first one was the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic Essay Contest. We were impressed by all the essays that were submitted from across Southeast Asia as well as from South Korea. We are very impressed with the depth and the rich perspective of all of the essays submitted. The second one is the ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic Webinar that will be hosted later this month in January. We do hope that the two initiatives will bring ASEAN-Korea closer than before. We look forward to see you all in the academic webinar late this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vermont. Now, as you may have noticed, the video message was recorded earlier this month before we fixed the date for today's event. Nevertheless, Dr. Vermont could not join us today online, but he and his team at the CSIS Indonesia was indispensable partners to make our essay contest a great success this year. Now, at this point, I would like to briefly introduce on the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest. The key objective of this program was to raise awareness and understanding on ASEAN and Korea relations by the youth in this region, by encouraging them to study and research on ASEAN-Korea partnership. Over 700 students across the region in the last 5 years have joined the contest, and although the number of winners vary in each year, we have so far produced 66 winners, including the 10 winning teams who will be awarded today. Last year, in an attempt to improve and upgrade the contest, despite the COVID-19 challenges, the ASEAN-Korea Center for the first time partnered with the think tanks in this region, the Korea National Diplomatic Academy and CSIS Indonesia. We also added a criterion by requiring all essay entries to have a prior review by an academic advisor before the entry. As a result of these efforts, we were pleased to see a significant increase in the quality of all papers submitted this year. Now, at this point, I would like to invite Professor Choi Won-gi, who is joining us online for his overall review of this year's essays as a representative of the evaluation committee. Please welcome Dr. Choi.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to you all. First of all, on behalf of Korea National Diplomatic Academy, I'd like to give my big applause and congratulations to those who are selected as winners in this very competitive essay contest. On behalf of the reviewers for this essay contest, I would like to offer a brief comment. First of all, I was very impressed by the overall quality of the papers submitted for this essay contest. In fact, we found that so many papers were so good, so that the review and selection process was very tough. We had a very tough process. A lot of papers were really well written and organized and suggested a very useful and practical ideas and proposals that could be readily adopted as real-life projects right away. In fact, digital cooperation is one of the 7 priorities in the new Southern Policy Plus, which is Korea's new and modified implementation strategy of the original New Southern Policy in the context of COVID-19. So digital transformation and digital cooperation is really important in enhancing Korea-ASEAN relations because it is one of the key factors shaping the economic progress and development in the coming future. Some of the proposals suggested in papers by those who are going to make a presentation today are in fact already incorporated in the New Southern Policy Plus as key cooperation projects. So for this reason, I believe that the presentation today will be a valuable addition to the depository of new and innovative ideas that would contribute to the Korea-ASEAN cooperation in the coming future. So thank you very much. And once again, congratulations to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Choi. Now, the moment that we've all been waiting for is the award ceremony of the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest. Now, the center has sent the award certificates and the prizes to all of the winners, and most of the winners have received them already, but some may take a bit longer due to the COVID-19 circumstances. Today, we'll once again recognize the winners during the online event, and we have 10 winning teams, the 4 special recognitions, 3 third prize winners, 2 second prize winners, and 1 grand prize winner. Without further ado, let's meet our winners. First, the 4 teams that received the special recognitions are Ms. Caroline Yong and Siu Tzu Wei from University Brunei Darussalam, Ms. Bora Bormei Sofwan and Chaina Lin from the Royal University of Phnom Penh, Ms. Eliati Priyanka and Lida Azarin Irmanti from Universitas Gadjah Mada, and Choi Hira and Chung Hyun-soo from Sungmyung Women's University. Congratulations to the 4 teams. We'll now invite the winners to give a few words. First is Ms. Caroline Yong and Siu Tzu Wei joining us from Brunei.
Hello everyone, my name is Wei and this is my colleague and good friend Caroline and we're from Brunei. Firstly, we would like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for this amazing award. In one of my sociology classes, there was an inside joke that sociologists and economists cannot be friends. After all, the capitalist economy is a large contributor to the unjust inequality that our society faces today. But here you have Carol, an economics major, and me, a sociology major, actually being friends, being able to agree with one another, and actually writing and completing a paper together. In all honesty, both of us still find it unbelievable that we're receiving this award. But if there's one thing that we are both sure of, it is to express our humble gratitude to those who have made this happen. We would also like to extend our gratitude to our lecturer and supervisor, Dr. Paul Carnegie of our University Brunei Darussalam, for his help throughout writing this paper. From the bottom of our hearts, we would like to say thank you again and congratulations to the other winners as well. We do hope to meet you all one day in the future. And in the meanwhile, please do stay safe as we continue to fight this pandemic together. 우리 모두 건강을 꼭 잘 챙기고 언젠가는 상황이 더 잘하면 만날 수 있으면 좋겠습니다. 다시 한번 감사합니다라고 말씀드리고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Wei. And she also spoke in Korean to say thank you and send us good blessings as well. We hope to see you soon. Next is Ms. Bora Sophan and Chaina Lin from Cambodia.
Greeting, Professor, fellow colleagues, and everyone here today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We would like to show our sincere appreciation to ASEAN-Korea Center for hosting this academic essay contest and awarding us with special recognition award with our essay prioritizes on ASEAN-Korea digital partnership in smart city. We're very honored to be a part of this community full of inspiring youth and seniors aiming to bring creative responses to transnational challenges and to promote people-to-people and state-to-state connections between ASEAN and Korea. We would like to further extend our appreciation to our academic advisor, Mr. Im Suk-chi, for his dedicated guidance, support, and commitment with us since the very beginning. Last but not least, our sincere thanks go to the team for their hard work in hosting the webinar. And congratulations to all the winners who are here today.
Thank you very much, Sofan and Alin. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Nida Irmanti from Indonesia.
Hi, greetings of the day to all participants in today's webinar. My name is Nida, and today I will be speaking on behalf of myself, as well as my partner Ellie from Indonesia, with whom I have collaborated with in composing the essay mapping and predicting cooperation in blockchain between Indonesia and South Korea post-COVID-19. Deepest gratitude to the ASEAN-Korea Center for recognizing a work that we are so passionate about as we try to explore the many possibilities in which modern technologies such as blockchain can be used to tackle ancient issues, for example, the current pandemic. On a more sentimental level, I would like to mark this achievement as a defining moment in my friendship with Ellie that has been going on for 5 years now. For everyone else listening, I hope we all find a friendship that can push all of us for the better as I've experienced, fortunately. And I hope for Ellie to feel the same. Lastly, I would like to extend our gratitude to all parties that have enabled us to reach this point. Special mention for our academic supervisor at the Gajah Mada University, Muhadi Sugiono, for his guidance and mentorship, and also all of our friends, family, and colleagues at our respective workplace who provide endless support. To conclude, what a pleasure it is to finally come face to face with fellow participants and winners. Combined, all of your hard work serves as great inspiration to both of us. Congratulations to all, and we hope to leave today's event more knowledgeable and inspired. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nida. And last but not least, Jung Hyun-soo, the screen is yours.
Hello, everyone. I am Hyun-soo Jung from South Korea on behalf of my team with Hirache. We were deeply to have been chosen as the special award recipients on Korea ASEAN Center 2020 Academic Essay Contest. We were so honored to have our work recognized in this way. We would like to give a special gratitude to our advisor, Min Jung Park, for guiding us to brainstorm and organize high-quality ideas. Korea ASEAN Virtual Gallery is a new concept we have created to recover the art display industry from COVID-19 contact-free movement, and we wanted to help the artists who are struggling to make a living. There were some difficulties and concerns while preparing for this essay, but I think we were able to bring good results because of our great teamwork. We would like to maintain a high interest and deep understanding of the ASEAN region even after this webinar. Thank you again to Korea ASEAN Center and everyone here today.
Thank you very much, Hyun-soo. Now, these 4 winning special recognition teams have won the certificates, and the cash prize worth 250,000 Korean won. Now, moving on to the third prize winners, we have 3 winning teams who are Mr. Michael Joseph Ostik from the University of the Philippines, Ms. Choi Myung-jin and Yu Ji-eun from the Seoul National University, and Ms. Huang Yin and Le Thi Min Duan from Vietnam. Well done and congratulations. I'll now ask them to say a few words. First, Mr. Michael Ostik from the Philippines.
Thank you very much for this award. This is sentimental for me because ASEAN and economics are fields that I am interested in. And through this paper and competition, I managed to produce a few insights. But more importantly, this is especially significant because it goes beyond ASEAN and into one of its key partners, the Republic of Korea. Indeed, there are a lot of initiatives, programs, partnerships that may be ventured to deliver advantages to this community. Through this competition, I get to learn from my peers within ASEAN-Korea. I hope that this is just the start of a much stronger partnership between ASEAN and Korea and among their people. So I thank the ASEAN-Korea Center and its partners for this opportunity and for recognizing my paper. I also thank my supervisors at the University of the Philippines, Dr. Santa Rita and Dr. Talampas. I wish to congratulate the other winners, but also all the participants, because just getting involved in the goals of this community alone is already an achievement in itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Choi Myung-jin from Korea.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to accept this award with all other respectable winners. I'm Myung-jin Choi from South Korea, and I'm here on behalf of my team with GNU. We've studied ASEAN-Korea cooperation in producing VR cultural tourism content, especially from the perspective of digital humanities. First of all, I would like to express our gratitude to ASEAN-Korea Center and judges who highly appreciated our essay. Also, I'd like to thank our academic advisor, Professor Ya in Seoul National University, and everyone who has helped with our accomplishment. I hope our essay contributes to develop a friendly relationship between ASEAN and Korea based on sincere mutual understanding. We will make a greater effort in the future to study ASEAN culture, history, and languages in our major. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myung-jin. And now, the last third prize winner to speak is Ms. Huang Yin from Vietnam, who's joining us from Korea.
Hello, everyone. My name is Huang Yin, and I'm from Vietnam. On behalf of my team, I want to first thank ASEAN-Korea Center from the bottom of my heart for this honor. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts on ASEAN-Korea digital partnership in the post-COVID-19 era, and later for awarding us this precious prize. This contest is not only a chance for us to gain knowledge and share ideas with other friends from Korea and other ASEAN countries, but also symbolizes for hope and a better future where we no longer face the pandemic, as well as the future where the economy of both sides grows at the pace that we may not even be able to imagine right now. My teammate and I have been telling each other that it still feels surreal that we somehow managed to pull this off. But I would say that this prize has inspired us to keep on doing what we've been doing, which is to help make this long-term relationship of ASEAN and Korea further strengthen. I also would like to thank our academic advisor, Professor Oh Bom-sok, for giving us advice and guiding us so that we could complete our essay as perfectly as possible. And lastly, I'd like to say that we feel very honored to be here today, and congratulations to all winners. Thank you so much. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Yan. Now, the third prize winners have received the certificates and cash prize worth of 500,000 Korean won. Moving up, we'll announce the two second prize winners, who are Ms. Callista Chong from the University of Oxford and Ms. Kim Young-hun from Seoul National University and Nam Hyun-jin from Yonsei University. Congratulations on your excellent work. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Callista Chong from Singapore for a few words.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for giving me this prestigious award. It is truly an honor, and I feel really privileged to have my work recognized by such a highly esteemed panel. I would also like to thank my academic advisor and mentor, Dr. Mark Zipan from the Said Business School, Oxford, for his dedication to this project, and my parents as well for their emotional support when I had to juggle the academic workload with this passion project. Participating in this essay was undeniably one of my highlights of 2020, which was a rather unusual year for many of us. I'm glad to have been able to combine my love for international relations with research on the very pertinent topic of digitalization in the post-COVID era. I look forward to getting involved in future initiatives organized by the ASEAN-Korea Center, and I hope that ASEAN-Korea relations will grow from strength to strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kalesta. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Kim Young-hun to the screen for her comments.
Hi, this is Young-hun Kim and Emmy Nam from South Korea. Thank you for this amazing award. We would like to first thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for awarding us this great prize. Participating in the contest gave us the opportunity to learn deeply about ASEAN-Korean relations, and we are honored and thankful that the judges at the contest recognize our long hours of discussion and research. We would also like to thank our supervising professor, John Dellery, for guiding the direction of our essay. We are especially glad that the contest introduced us to such talented peers from so many different countries, and we are so proud to have been included in the list of alumni of the winners of this contest. I hope that COVID ends soon so that we could all physically meet to share our ideas and thoughts. Once again, thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you very much, Young-hun and Namjin. Now, the second prize winners have been awarded with certificates and cash prize worth 1 million Korean won. Now, finally, the grand prize. After a very fierce competition, a multinational team has been awarded with the grand prize of the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest. And the winner is... Please give a big round of applause for Ms. Yan-min Young and Yi-Hok Chae from Nanyang Technological University. Congratulations. Yan-min is originally from Malaysia and is currently studying at the NTU with Hok Chae, who is from Singapore. The grand prize winners are awarded with certificates and cash prize of 2 million Korean won. Also, their essay will be published in the next issue of the Southeast Asia Review, an academic journal published by the Korean Association of Southeast Asian Studies. Now, at this time, allow me to invite Hok Chae and Yan-min for the remarks. Hok Chae, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. I'm Hok Chae, and my teammate Yan-min and I are honored and humbled to have our work recognized. We would like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for organizing this event and advisor Professor Kei Koga, as well as everyone else who has rendered support to us throughout this journey in a way or another. This competition had enabled us to explore a timely topic and express our perspectives on how ASEAN and South Korea can cooperate in the post-COVID-19 global arena. We hope that our essays, including each and every one that was submitted, would act as a catalyst and attract more like-minded individuals to not only explore the possibilities, but also to put these possibilities into action. This is so that the joint vision statement for peace, prosperity, and partnership between ASEAN and South Korea could be turned into reality. Once again, thank you, and we wish you all a blessed and healthy year ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Now we'll have a time for the group photo session. For those of us joining on Zoom, please make sure that you appear fully on your screen. And here at the ASEAN Hall, I would like to invite Secretary General Yi-Hyuk to the stage, and also the invited professors. Now, as we rehearsed yesterday, we'll take 2 photos, the first one without the certificates and the second one with the certificates. This is a new trend in this age of webinars. Okay, everyone, now smile. Look in your cameras, everyone. We'll take the photo now. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, next photo, we'll have your certificates, please. Everyone, prepare your certificates. Okay, we'll take the photos now. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Now that ends our award ceremony part of today's webinar. Moving on. As I mentioned in the opening, Ms. Rodora Babaran the Director for Human Development of the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Department at the ASEAN Secretariat, has given us a keynote address on the role of the youth in ASEAN-Korea relations. She could not join us online today, but she has sent us a pre-recorded video of her remarks. Now, please enjoy her lecture.
Your Excellency, Mr. Lee Yuk, Secretary General of ASEAN-Korea Center, Dr. Philips Vermonte, Director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies of Indonesia, distinguished delegates, Annyeong haseyo. I am very pleased to take part in this ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic webinar today. Allow me to start my remarks by revisiting the history of ASEAN-ROK relations and highlighting how much our partnership has grown over the past few decades. 1989 marked an important year as it was when ASEAN and the Republic of Korea initiated sectoral dialogue relations. 2 years later, at the 24th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting in July 1991 in Malaysia, ROK became ASEAN's dialogue partner. Since then, ASEAN and ROK has continued to be reliable and trusted partners for all three ASEAN community pillars: the political security cooperation, economic cooperation, and social-cultural cooperation. By 2019, the ROK was already the fifth largest trading partner of ASEAN, with two-way trade reaching $156.5 billion. I recall that in November 2019, ASEAN and the ROK celebrated the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-ROK dialogue relations with a commemorative summit held in Busan. The commemorative summit adopted the ASEAN-ROK Joint Vision Statement for Peace, Prosperity, and Partnership to set out a strategic framework to advance ASEAN-ROK relations. ASEAN and the ROK both place a strong emphasis on people-to-people exchange with a view to deepen friendship and understanding between the peoples of ASEAN and ROK through various key initiatives. In the area of youth development, for almost 22 years, the young people of ASEAN and Korea have been coming together to participate in flagship youth exchange programs such as the ASEAN-Korea Youth Exchange and Cultural Community Building Program and the ASEAN-Korea Frontiers Forum. To improve the competitiveness of ASEAN's human resources and forge closer ties between ASEAN and ROK, the ROK has also established the ASEAN-ROK Scholarship for Korean Studies program coordinated by the ASEAN University Network, and the Higher Education for ASEAN Talents or HEAT Scholarship program for ASEAN faculty members. In response to COVID-19, ROK has generously supported member states through the project on enhancing COVID-19 detection capacity for COVID-19 and provided PCR equipment and corresponding test kits to the Ministries of Health of ASEAN member states. ROK has also committed to contribute $1 million to the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. Beyond that, the ASEAN-ROK Cooperation Fund, or AKCF, has also been supporting a wide range of projects in various sectors initiated by ASEAN member states and the ROK. As part of its new Southern policy, ROK has doubled its contribution to the fund to support more cooperation projects across the three pillars of the ASEAN community. This is a step towards realizing ASEAN connectivity and narrowing the development gap across the region. The new ASEAN-ROK Plan of Action 2021 to 2025 spells out the strategic priorities of future cooperation projects. Convening this ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic webinar aligns well with our leaders' decision to jointly promote people-to-people links between the youth of ASEAN and Korea, creating conditions for future peace and prosperity in ASEAN and Korea will be anchored upon deeper connectivity between our young people. Ladies and gentlemen, there are three key messages I would like to impart in my remarks today. The first is that ASEAN and Korea are like-minded in the belief that young people hold the key to the future. ASEAN's more than 213 million young and vibrant people are its most precious asset. A third of ASEAN's population consists of young people aged between 15 and 34 years old. At the 2019 ASEAN-Korea Commemorative Summit in Busan, Strengthening cooperation in the youth sector was identified as a shared priority for both ASEAN and Korea. In fact, for the next 5 years, the ASEAN youth ministers intend to focus on two critical priorities. Firstly, empowering ASEAN youth to be future ready through digital skills, and secondly, widening youth engagement in regional policy dialogue. Going forward, ASEAN intends to boost its partnership with dialogue partners, particularly the ROK, in implementing initiatives that seek to benefit young people from the region. Towards this end, the ASEAN Senior Officials Meeting on Youth, or the SOMI, is currently developing the ASEAN Work Plan on Youth 2021 to 2025. As future leaders, change makers, and enablers of sustainable development, we need to ensure that our young people will be able to adapt to an ever-changing world. COVID-19 has been a truly challenging time for young people globally. We need to take a long and hard look at how the COVID-19 crisis has dramatically altered learning environments and the workplace. Prolonged school-to-work transitions have resulted in mass numbers of youth who are not in employment, education, and training. The worldwide closure of schools, universities, and technical and vocational training institutions poses a serious threat to learning continuity and skills development. In the ASEAN region alone, estimates place more than 152 million children and youth as having been affected. The International Labor Organization reports that more than 1 in 6 young people have stopped working since the onset of COVID-19. Young workers who continue to be employed have had their working hours reduced by 23%. Prior to the crisis, young people globally were already 3 times more likely to be unemployed compared to adults. The World Economic Forum's recent ASEAN Youth Survey 2020 investigated how young people in the region are coping with the disruptions triggered by the pandemic. With remote learning and work-from-home arrangements becoming more commonplace, COVID-19 has compelled ASEAN youth to increase their digital footprint, nurture a growth mindset, develop resilience, and innovate new business strategies to generate income. However, the survey also found that there are segments of young people that are at risk of being left behind, particularly those who are less digitally included, young workers in the gig economy, and young entrepreneurs. The key findings of a recent UNICEF survey also show that high costs, poor infrastructure, and limited information are the key challenges that ASEAN children and youth face when acquiring digital skills and literacy. The COVID-19 pandemic has indeed amplified a number of unresolved issues, putting a spotlight on a stark digital divide. My second message, therefore, is that this crisis presents a unique opportunity for governments across ASEAN to accelerate the promotion of inclusive digital transformation with a view towards ensuring quality, equity, and efficiency. The Ministers of Education of ASEAN recently convened the Conference on the Digital Transformation of Education to precisely highlight the role that technology is playing and will continue to play in addressing COVID-19's disruption to education delivery in ASEAN. The ASEAN's Ministers of Education pledged to reimagine the region's education systems through the integration of technology in education and ensuring that curricula inculcate both technical and 21st century skills among our students. More importantly, the role of children and young people was also regarded as a driver in enabling the digital transformation of ASEAN's education systems. Our leaders also adopted the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan at the 37th ASEAN Summit last year. This will serve as a consolidated strategy for ASEAN sectoral bodies to identify and coordinate on the most relevant initiatives to rebuild the region post-COVID-19. In promoting the digital transformation of education, the framework features strategies such as promotion of digital skills and literacy, 21st century skills, as well as the use of ICT to support education practices across ASEAN, including remote learning. Human capital development is an issue of great importance for ASEAN, particularly as we prepare for the impacts of megatrends, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and other global shocks such as COVID-19. At the core of this effort is equipping ASEAN's workforce with skills for the future of work. The recent adoption of the ASEAN Declaration on Human Resource Development for the Changing World of Work at the 36th ASEAN Summit last year is evidence of ASEAN's commitment to build our workforce resilience to future disruptions. Going forward, developing skilled and employable human resources will be critical to support the recovery of the region's economies and enable ASEAN to build back better. To translate the declaration into concrete strategies and actions, the roadmap of ASEAN Declaration on Human Resources Development for the Changing World of Work was launched by ASEAN Labor and Education Ministers at a high-level conference hosted by Vietnam last year. The declaration and its roadmap aim to cultivate a culture of lifelong learning and promote inclusive education through technology-enabled means. The roadmap comprises activities to digitally transform education in our region, with emphasis on promoting digital literacy and 21st century skills, digital infrastructure development, online platforms, and open educational resources. In a recent ASEAN Youth Sector meeting, attended by representatives from ROK, we learned that the pandemic has affected a number of ROK-led youth exchange programs intended for implementation in 2020. Despite the circumstances, I note that ROK has been taking proactive steps to ensure the continuation of these programs by shifting certain activities into a virtual format. Some examples include the recent ASEAN-Korea Youth Summit, organized by the National Council of Youth Organizations in Korea, and the ASEAN University Network in November 2020. The 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest and this ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic Webinar being held today. These recent steps taken by ROK speak to their firm resolve to empower and support young people, even in the face of a raging pandemic. It also demonstrates ROK's adaptability to leverage digital tools and technology to continue to cater to the needs of young people. The digital transformation of the region will not only enable sustainable development, more importantly, it is crucial to rebuilding our societies and economies post-COVID-19. ASEAN leaders recognize inclusive digital transformation as a key factor in sustaining economic growth, enhancing community well-being, and promoting integration in ASEAN. With the acceleration of 4IR-driven digital transformation, our societies have become increasingly reliant on digital skills, more so than we might think at first. Digital skills have become necessary across sectors and are no longer limited to tech careers. In addition, we need to anticipate the creation of new and more jobs requiring advanced digital skills. It is clear that training our young workforce to work and thrive in a digital space is vital to the growth of the ASEAN region. The accelerated technological transformation driven by the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the COVID-19 pandemic has urged ASEAN member states to ensure that their young citizens have the requisite knowledge, skills, mindset, passion, and motivation to face up to the challenges of a future economy. Though the trajectory is long, ASEAN countries are now taking steps towards making a transition from an investment-led to an innovation-led economic growth model. We learned from a recent meeting attended by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family of the ROK that Korea is currently prioritizing making online learning more widely available. On the industry side, Korea is also negotiating new agreements in the big data sector to create more jobs for young people. Additionally, Korea is preparing for the digital transformation of education, primarily through the provision of devices, the strengthening of IT networks, the development of educational programs, the capacity building of future educators, as well as the establishment of new policies, among others. Linking to the theme of the contest and my two previous messages, my final message is that whilst young people globally have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19, we have found that it is also young people who are leading the fight against the pandemic. Last year, together with the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, the ASEAN Foundation, and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the ASEAN Secretariat organized a 4-episode interactive webinar series on ASEAN youth and COVID-19. The 4-part webinar series explored the role of ASEAN youth in adapting to COVID-19 and fostering intergenerational learning and exchange. The previous webinars in the series showcased success stories of inspiring young leaders, frontliners, volunteers, entrepreneurs, and innovators who were able to transform challenges into opportunities. ASEAN and Korean youth have been driving the pandemic response as medical frontliners, implementers of social welfare projects, initiators of groundbreaking enterprises, as well as social innovators. In doing so, they have amplified the important role of youth as catalysts in driving social progress, economic growth, and environmental sustainability, ultimately contributing towards achieving the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Despite the trying circumstances ASEAN and Korean youth are currently facing, it is inspiring to witness that they remain dynamic and empowering their communities to become more adaptive and resilient. In the face of an evolving pandemic, the strong passion, creativity, and leadership of young people empowers them through this crisis. There is no doubt that young people can contribute a great deal to the ASEAN-Korea community in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, be it by engaging in policy dialogue with leaders, implementing community projects and social enterprises, or promoting youth leadership and volunteerism. This ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest 2020 is clear evidence of how our young people can leverage innovation and technology and become drivers of a better and more sustainable post-COVID future. I am greatly impressed to see young people using their creativity and energy in conceptualizing ideas that break new grounds in the fields of trade, e-commerce, and tourism, and seek to uplift the lives of people from the ASEAN ROK community. In closing, I would like to congratulate the winners of the 2020 ASEAN-Korea Academic Essay Contest. I hope this webinar can provide you with a platform to network and exchange insights with your fellow youth and experts on how you can collaborate and contribute more meaningfully to the post-pandemic recovery of the ASEAN ROK community. I thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for organizing this very important event, and I wish you a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Ms. Babaran's kind and encouraging words for the youth of ASEAN and Korea during these difficult times as we try to consolidate our efforts to recover from the pandemic and also further enhance our partnership. Now, I would like to move on to the presentation part of the webinar today. But before we begin the presentations, I would like to introduce the professors who are with us today. Now, our first professor is Professor Cho Won-deuk, who is a professor at the Center for ASEAN-India Studies of the KNDA. He'll provide comments for the session 1 after all presentations have been made. Next, Professor Kim Hyung-jong is a professor of international relations at Yonsei University. He'll be providing comments for the session 2 after the 3 presentations have been made. For our viewers on YouTube, there will be some time for Q&A at the end of each session. There will be 3 presentations per session, so if you have any questions, please post your questions on our YouTube live chat, and the questions will be collected and passed on to the professors at the end of each session to be discussed during the discussion session of the presentation session. Participants on Zoom also may simply raise your hand and express yourself if you have any questions Now, without further ado, let us begin the presentation. Our first session is on the economic digital partnership between ASEAN and Korea. First, I would like to invite Ms. Yanmin Yong from Nanyang Technological University to present her team's essay. Now, Yanmin, the screen is yours.
Greetings, I'm Yanmin, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to present this work by Hock Choi and I, titled Strengthening ASEAN-Korea Digital Economic Cooperation via Integrated E-Platforms. Now, out of all the areas of cooperation, why the economy? We have two reasons for this. Firstly, economies worldwide have been severely hampered by the pandemic, and countries are expected to rebuild economies in an era of limited movements. ASEAN and South Korea are no exceptions. This makes the development of a digital economy more pertinent than ever. The second reason is simply because this is a win-win deal where both ASEAN and Korea stand to gain economically. With a developed digital economy, ASEAN has a potential gain of $1 trillion. Having an economically vibrant partner will in turn better Korea's economic diversification goals. The next question would then be, how can the two forge cooperation on this front? E-platforms is our answer to this question. We have examined two aspects which we believe are important elements of a digital economy, e-commerce and business networking. Without further ado, let's dive into the first topic on e-commerce. Online merchandising occurs over e-marketplaces, yet the mediums which ASEAN and Korean consumers are accustomed to are jarringly different. ASEAN's e-commerce market was found to be dominated by Alibaba's Lazada, and as for Korea, that would be Coupang. This means that there exists high barriers to e-market penetration since ASEAN and Korean consumers have the tendency to visit platforms which are predominantly catered for their region's businesses. Inspired by an existing South Korean initiative by Korea, we propose for an integrated business to consumer e-marketplace that centralizes ASEAN and Korean firms into one single platform. And this is to enable businesses to better identify potential cooperation opportunities with one another without being overly distracted by other alternatives. Additional benefits such as access to qualified leads and easier establishment of brand credibility also help reduce the barriers to e-market penetration. The next suggestion is built upon the ASEAN Single Window Initiative. The gist of it is to create a common data repository that facilitates cross-border trade, which is the necessary process that entails e-commerce. Now, just like how the ASEAN Single Window merges member states' national single windows, we thought of creating a subsidiary ASEAN-Korea e-trade data platform. This can simply be achieved by consolidating the pertinent information from ASEAN and Korea's single windows. In fact, we believe that this process may even accelerate digital knowledge transfer, since efficient systems that are inbuilt in Korea's well-developed national single window could be applied to improve the integrated e-platform and even the ASEAN single window. The next aspect we've examined is business networking. As the saying goes, it is not only what you know, but also who you know that matters. Networking is equally important in the virtual business realm. Unfortunately, COVID-19's unpredictability has made it necessary for networking modes to become more digitalized. In fact, several ASEAN-Korea networking initiatives have already been shifted into the virtual space. Now, despite these adaptations, the existing initiatives, we believe, have two inadequacies. Firstly, the current networking initiatives are segregated in accordance to firms' industries. While such a format has its merits, it puts a limit to cross-industrial cooperation, which is something that is increasingly relevant in the post-COVID-19 setting, as businesses who wish to digitize require collaboration with the IT sector in particular. Secondly, these networking events occur over a fixed period of time, and such time constraint would mean that firms may not have sufficient time to maximize their networking opportunities. To tackle these problems, we have come up with the idea of an ASEAN-Korea social business e-networking platform, ASBET for short. Now, it aims to serve as a multilateral networking avenue where intra and inter-sector business networking are made possible. Companies could create profiles and network with firms from other industries. As for time constraint, well, that will no longer be an issue because like all socializing applications out there, our proposed idea is a 24/7 functioning service. So long as the ASEAN-Korea firms agree to communicate, they could conduct consultation sessions, online meetings, and discussions using the inbuilt features such as secure chat rooms and video conferencing. And with ample time for information sharing, the SBET creates a space for more digital insight transfers and heighten the possibility for collaborative innovation. potentially contributing to the narrowing of digital gaps between large and small firms. Our ideas, however, are not without its shortcomings. We have identified 3 limitations and proposed some solutions. For the integrated e-marketplace and e-trade data repository, data security breaches are potential threats. We thus suggest for the incorporation of Korea into the development of the 2018 ASEAN Framework on Digital Data Governance so as to create an environment where data privacy is secure. Moreover, less digitally advanced ASEAN member states lack the required infrastructures to sustain the functioning of e-platforms. More ASEAN-Korea cooperative projects aimed at developing the requisite facilities such as data centers could be promoted. Lastly, the networking application may not be easily accessed among states who are ill-equipped with internet and broadband facilities. While the long-term solution would be to accelerate the ASEAN-Korea commitment to ICT-related objectives, a short-term solution is to develop a mobile phone application that could be utilized offline. Now, this is particularly feasible since mobile penetration is high across ASEAN. Despite SBAP's flaws, it is also interesting to note that its social media style caters to the large social site user base in both ASEAN and Korea. It is thus likely that most people will be promptly attuned to utilizing the platform for networking. In essence, we posit that digital economic cooperation should be at the forefront of ASEAN-Korea's agenda list as it would greatly aid countries to tide over pandemic-triggered downturns. Our overarching suggestion is to establish tailored integrated e-platforms. Focusing on 2 core aspects of a digital economy, we have shown how e-platforms could facilitate activities in e-commerce and business networking. What is even more interesting about this idea is that it could be conveniently applied to other aspects of ASEAN-Korea digital cooperation. And the list of potential e-platforms that could be created is almost non-exhaustive, and all that's left to do is to identify what are the optimal versions of e-platforms to be utilized. As COVID accelerates our pace in digitalization, it is our belief that the only way forward is digital on digital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yan-Min. Now, next, I would like to invite Mr. Michael Ostik from the Philippines to deliver his presentation. Michael, please.
Thank you, CK, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be speaking about the digitalization and trade in services, probing country and sector level indicators to optimize the impact of the ASEAN-Korea partnership. It is great that the previous session or the previous presentation talked about the general aspects of the economies of ASEAN and Korea, whereas my presentation will be very specific to trade in services. So looking at trade in services, it is the new engine of growth in ASEAN. For example, 60% of its FDI inflow is for trade in services. All ASEAN member states have large trade in services components, which is led by 101% in Singapore, whereas others range from 6.1 to 34.5%. For ROK, it is 14.5%. The global average is 13.3%. But as you can see in the figure here on the right, whereas ASEAN's trade in services balance is increasing, that of ROKs is decreasing. Despite that, bilateral trade remains modest and only in certain sectors. For example, it's only 5%. For example, ROK's share in ASEAN total trade is only 5%, and the growth is only 5.9%. Why do we want to study trade in services? One, it will benefit most from digitalization. What we have seen, it is a large and growing sector. In the ROK, it's already suffering from low labor productivity and lag growth, and it's not as favored by government policies as the industrial economy. In ASEAN, it is a large source of employment and is poised for domestic strengthening as well. What we will see also is that the high development in Singapore and Malaysia, plus the large base in industrializing economies and high growth rate in the lesser developed economies of ASEAN complement the ROK's trade in services outlook. We have also seen that trade in services have been resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these include education, online banking, e-tourism, software games, etc. And we also see a trend in servicification of goods in data economies. But then there are benefits and challenges, right? And I'm just going to go through this very briefly. It widens trade. It gives access to customers, a larger base of customers. enhances your production, and it gives you access to knowledge as well. It also maximizes efficiency of scope and services. But then there are also challenges. For example, it has been alleged that automation might lead to loss of jobs and might exacerbate inequality. There's also the inability of developing economies to adopt. And finally, the World Trade Organization needs to catch up on digital trade. So just to give you a brief literature review, Lopez and Ferenc in 2018 said that just 10% increase in digital connectivity leads to a 3.2% increase in exports of telecommunications, but there's negative effect on construction, wholesale, and retail services. Choi says that the doubling of internet usage leads to 2.2 to 4% increase in services trade. And van der Merel says that empirical model shows that the liberalization, deregulation, good governance, harmonization of jurisdictions, and factor endowments, particularly ICT, are the determinants of trade and services. So what we are trying to do in this paper is to measure digitalization per se, instead of proxies, as what previous research has done. We also want to see the effects of digitalization specific to ASEAN-Korea, as previous studies have only tackled the EU, OECD, or the entire world. And finally, we actually use the Digital Adoption Index, which is the supply-side digitalization of people, businesses, and governments. And it is superior in the sense that it has exhaustive metrics, and it also covers more countries, and it segregates measurements across user groups, etc. So I'm just going to go through the results very briefly. The first thing that we are finding out is that there is a significant effect of digitalization in international trade and services across ASEAN and Korea. And we see this in the graph over here. In particular, just one unit increase in digitalization. So that digitalization index goes from 0 to 100%. And just one unit increase in there results in 1,209% increase in exports and 1,491 increase in imports. So this supports earlier studies, but now what we are seeing is that there is an overall larger cumulative effect. But then there is a disproportionate effect on ASEAN-Korea, as you can see in here. There are countries that are doing well, whereas there are countries that are actually below the curve. And that is because ASEAN-Korea bilateral trade in services is meager and concentrated among a few. What we can see here in this plot is that trade in services crowds towards certain sectors and avoids others. So this is somehow different from what we observe in trade in goods, where in trade in goods, you will actually see countries specializing. So for example, a normal trade in goods plot would be, for example, if one country specializes in, for example, an agricultural product, the other one will specialize in another agricultural product, because that way they can establish complementarity. But we don't see that pattern in trade and services. Instead, we see that it follows the OECD pattern. That means that there is use of production inputs from both exporting and importing countries. So what are the implications of this? It means that cost becomes a primary determinant. So what countries find really cheap to trade or really cheap to produce, that is what they will be trading more. Just one limiting factor in one country, for example, a restrictive regulation, is sufficient to curb bilateral trade, and that each country is required to both import and export service transactions. So this plot just gives us a breakdown of trade and services across the several different categories and of trade and services. So we see here manufacturing, maintenance, transportation, travel, etc. And what we are seeing here is that there is a positive impact across sectors, unlike in OECD. All right, so as mentioned a while ago, in OECD countries, they found that there were negative effects for example, wholesale and retail and construction. But for ASEAN and Korea, it's all positive. So there probably could be many different reasons. It might still be in its infancy. That's why digitalization is still exhibiting increasing returns. Or that ASEAN member states and Korea are successful in adoption, there may be other reasons as well. But what we want to say here is that it should allay simmering fears of, for example, unemployment or increasing prices of goods and services, because the impact is positive. There is the largest impact in financial services, but no significant impact in manufacturing services exports. And there are several explanations and recommendations for this. So for example, it could be due to premature aging of certain economies. And Lim in 2012 said that, for example, in the ROK, deindustrialization in the context of a rising services economy may be alleviated by focusing on sectors whose productivity rise more rapidly and which contribute growth to other sectors. So it is kind of expected that other categories would benefit more from digitalization than others. So what's the implication of that? That we have to establish linkages in order to strengthen and establish or promote complementarity of services. In the ROK, most of the services trade are in manufacturing, travel, transport, construction, and IP services, but the last three are in large deficit. In ASEAN, trade is dominated by transport and travel, while other lucrative sectors, as we have identified in the previous slide, such as construction, IP, telecommunications, remain underserved. In both ASEAN and the ROK, insurance and financial services constitute a small share, and it's in fact lower than developing Asia average. What's happening here is that in intra-ASEAN, we actually see that travel grabs the largest share. And this is actually a success story because digital technologies adoption, because ASEAN has managed to adopt digital technologies very well when it comes to travel. But then that comes at the expense of other categories, for example, financial services, IP, insurance, and others. In most sectors, services are still largely non-tradable. High domestic value added means that production and consumption start and end within a country, and foreign value add is still low. And in fact, there's only a slight increase in Brunei, Cambodia, Philippines, and Vietnam. So just to give you a case study before we conclude, in ASEAN, actually, there has been plans, or there actually has been a program in place to integrate the insurance sector. There are several challenges for that. For example, there are incongruencies in the liberalization commitments. There is a heterogeneous population, so that means that you would have different insurance indicators. There's also different regulatory regimes which heighten the underwriting risks of insurance firms. But digitalization can actually address those challenges by defragmenting the market. So for example, it aids ASEAN member states with data for actuarial decision-making. It also delegates and integrates vertical services among ASEAN member states so that they can share processes or operations within that entire vertical chain. And they provide customers with digital platforms to ease out the transactions. So what we're saying here is that had these been implemented prior to COVID-19 or had been implemented at a much larger scale, the burden on individuals and governments to finance mortality and hospitalizations would not have been as severe. So to conclude, digitalization of international trade and services must be a key priority for the ASEAN-Korea partnership. Because it amplifies the benefits of digitalization. The ASEAN-Korea partnership amplifies the benefits of digitalization. For example, it provides access to more markets. It gives complementarities in a wider range of services subsectors what we have seen, and the institutional support and formulation from the implementation of regional policies. As we have seen, COVID-19 has resulted in both demand and supply shocks. But digitalization acts by reversing supply shocks via enhanced productivities, employment effects, interactions with institutions and public governance. And just for a final point, economic shocks require economic regulation, which ASEAN and Korea would be able to tackle very easily. The quality of subsequent policies and regulations will be a determinant of trade and services. That's why we require or we need evidence-based policies on sectors and institutional frameworks. So just to, if anyone's interested, there are further research suggestions here. So for example, we can narrow it into certain subsectors. The categories of WTO do not capture medical and health services, and that might be a very important one right now, given the COVID-19 pandemic. We can also look at time-lag digital adoption in cases of delayed trade effects. So what we did in this research was that we actually investigated the effect on the same year, but it could be that digitalization would have delayed effects, right? So for example, you could probably investigate it for next year or for 2 years after that. And we could also conduct like several robustness tests. So what we did in our methodology is a very simple regression, but we could definitely extend that further by looking at other different aspects as well. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, once again, if there are any questions that you would like to address, please leave a comment on our YouTube live chat. And for those of us joining on Zoom, please wait until the final presentation has been finished. Now, moving on, we'll invite the last speaker of session 1, who is Ms. Le Duan from Vietnam, currently joining us from Australia.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Duan. I am a part of the team together with him. Once again, we are extremely grateful for being given the chance to present our piece of work. So our chosen topic was Korean-Asian e-commerce partnership in a post-COVID-19 era towards new potential. Our presentation agenda today includes COVID-19's impact on e-commerce in general, an overview on ASEAN-Korea partnership, a look at the e-commerce industry in Korea and ASEAN, and finally our recommendations on how to strengthen the e-commerce partnership between both sides. So in today's world, e-commerce has been an essential part of our lives, which involves the act of buying and selling goods or services conducted via virtual marketplaces or online channels. As people began social distancing as well as working or schooling from home due to government lockdowns, many people have changed their shopping behavior. Consumers now tend to start shopping online in greater numbers and frequency. The e-commerce industry in Korea and ASEAN countries has accelerated and is projected to grow into one of the leading cooperation areas between both sides during and after the pandemic. Let's take a look at the ASEAN-Korea partnership overview. So the relationship between both sides in the past 30 years is significant, with Southeast Asia countries being Korea's second biggest trading partner. So both sides have achieved important milestones with one another, some of which are the New Southern Policy, the ASEAN ROK Spatial Summit, and recently Korea's contribution to COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. However, COVID-19 is a disruptive factor for all governments in the future to remain relevant to the new normal where physical contact is minimized. A strong emphasis on digital partnership is crucial for both Korea and ASEAN countries. We have already had the first country from ASEAN launching digital partnership, with the Republic of Korea being Singapore on 22nd of June 2020. So Korea should consider expanding a similar agreement with other countries from ASEAN, with the main focus being e-commerce this time. Now let's move on to the e-commerce industry in Korea. So the e-commerce industry in Korea ranked fifth in 2019 global ranking and is the third biggest e-commerce market in Asia after China and Japan, with 103.48 billion US dollar in e-commerce sales, thanks to the well-established ICT infrastructure, with almost 90% of the population having access to the internet, the high mobile phone penetration rate, and the logistic and delivery services being the key drivers of the e-commerce market. There are, however, some challenges, such as the lack of skilled workers due to the decline in working age population and competition with the largest economies in the world. So an analysis of global data's e-commerce demonstrates that the country's e-commerce market is estimated at 104 trillion Korean won with annual growth of 22.3% in 2020. It's also expected that the market will reach 163.7 trillion Korean won in 2024. Moving on to the e-commerce industry in Southeast Asia. The consumers here are leaning towards buying online, with their spending predicted to triple from 125 billion US dollar to 390 billion US dollar, and the number of digital consumers reaching 10 million by 2025. So Asian e-commerce rising fast are due to the region's growing middle class expected to reach 161 million by 2030, major online marketplaces emerging, and social media savvy people. Some weaknesses of the industry include unclear regulatory requirements, consumers skeptics regarding payment method, and rural area delivery challenges. In the chart here, we can see that there are significant growth in e-commerce merchandise value being expected in the region in 2025 in all ASEAN countries, with Indonesia having the most drastic change. Another most important part is our recommendations for strengthening e-commerce partnership between Korea and ASEAN in the post-COVID-19 era. So our first solution is to use fintech for faster payment and data analysis purpose. So fintech has already affected online shopping to a significant degree with e-wallet, P2P payments, and in-app purchasing. The reasons why we recommend this is to eliminate the customer's fear of hassle and untrustworthiness while they pay online. And it also mitigates the risk of COVID-19 because we don't have to do cash in hand payment anymore. It also does not require a heavy cost over the top in international transaction. And finally, fintech can help us to collect customer information through different apps and services to find out the certain purchasing patterns, which can be helpful when we do marketing campaigns. Our second recommendation is a specialized e-commerce training program, which is a 6-month rotational program exposing top performers in the industry to different aspects of e-commerce through a variety of challenges experiences. So we nominate 6 important aspects that the program will focus on, which are international assignments, real-world skills development, coaching, mentoring, network expansion, and finally, performance evaluation. Our third recommendation is funding scholarship for e-commerce talent. We think a full scholarship program to study at Korean universities for excellent students from ASEAN and Korean universities will be beneficial for both sides. With fields of study includes e-commerce related courses. For example, e-commerce studies, information technology, marketing, logistics, etc. However, there are some requirements attached with the scholarship, which is 3 years working for a Korean entity upon course completion, and the recipients have to return to their home countries to contribute to the e-commerce industry later on. So to conclude the presentation, we have seen that COVID-19 has urged Korea to expand the alliance with other countries, and with a fast and steady growing e-commerce market, ASEAN is definitely one of the most potential partners at the moment. And like what I have just mentioned, we have come up with 3 recommendations that, according to us, will fit best regarding the relationship between ASEAN and Korea, which are fintech to alter and improve the online payment system as a whole, and e-commerce training program for talents from Korea and ASEAN. Finally, is the funded scholarships at Korean universities to nurture young e-commerce talents. So that's all for my part. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Doan. Now we all had our 3 presentations of session 1. So at this point, I would like to invite Professor Cho for his comments on the presentations and also on the overall economic digital partnership between ASEAN and Korea. Professor Cho?
Thank you. Thank you, 3 presenters, for giving very interesting topics. And overall, the 3 essays actually are very timely and worth of attention in the sense that we are in the middle of the COVID-19 still, and COVID-19 actually expedited the digitalization of the economy, which was developed before COVID-19. So in this regard, the topic of the digital economy and ASEAN ROK digital economic cooperation is very important for making co-prosperity between the ASEAN and Korea. So I have very enjoying reading this topic essays. And I will give a brief comment on each papers, and then I will give some questions which comes from YouTube participants. First of all, the paper essays titled "Strengthening ASEAN ROK Digital Economic Cooperation via Integrated E-Platforms." This essay actually provide very specific discussions and more focused on research regarding the digital economic cooperation between ASEAN and Korea. Actually, it provides some unique integrated e-platforms, mingling e-commercial concept with business networks. Especially that the author brings the ASEAN side e-commercial initiative like ASEAN single window, and also the articles mentioned about the ASEAN ROK social business network platform, and also it reviewed a current ASEAN ROK network initiative, and the essay bring some kind of a limitation and challenge for the current ASEAN ROK network initiative. So the essays integrated the current e-commercial situation from ASEAN and ROK into the current business network. So it generated the concept of the integrated e-platforms, and which is very innovative and interesting. But as the essays actually mentioned, there are some limitation and potential challenges to the implementation of integrated ASEAN ROK platforms. In addition to the security issues regarding integrated platform, as I think one of the major challenges is the digital gap in ASEAN. As the papers mentioned that some countries in the Mekong area have some very weak digitalizations compared with other relatively developed countries in ASEAN. So in ASEAN, there is some discussion about the development gap between the maritime ASEAN countries and mainland ASEAN countries. And in addition, there is a very unique digital gap. So in order for the ROK and ASEAN to develop this concept of integrated e-platform for digital economic corporations, we need to make sure to improve digital infrastructure in less developed countries in Mekong area. So I think it is not easy task to develop this kind of digital infrastructure. So we need to have a very daunting task for us, both ASEAN and ROK. So we need to keep cooperation between two sides for strengthening ASEAN ROK digital economic cooperations, as the papers mentioned. And second paper regarding the international trade in service. Actually, I had enjoyed reading this paper because this paper is very academic and in part because it utilized some statistics and case studies to verify that the authored and essays theoretical and the discussion justification. So I think even if it is not thorough or perfect statistical analysis regarding the impact of digitalization on imports and exports and trade and business, but it shows some correlation and trend between digitalization and increase of imports and exports in service sectors. So it is very interesting finding, and also it provides some case studies to more justify his evidence from the statistics. And also he utilized the comparative advantage concepts. Actually, the comparative advantage concepts comes from the trade in goods a long time ago, but he utilized this concept in the services sector. So it's a little bit creative. So in the last part of the essay, he mentioned that digitalization of all sectors would be ideal, but he mentioned that the limited resources demands an allocation based on returns. I think that this is very important observations. In order for ASEAN and Korea to develop the digital trade in service, we need to make sure to focus on available sector and sectors with more returns rather than to focus on comprehensive sectors. And also, as I mentioned before, it used the multi-method approach to using the statistics and case studies. It's a very strong point in this paper. And the last paper about the e-commerce partnerships. I think this is very interesting concept because it's a relatively new concept of ASEAN ROK partnership to cope with COVID-19 shocks and economic crisis, because ASEAN countries and Korea emphasize the economic resilience in addition to coping with the public health crisis. And digital partnership concept is actually I think the future-oriented concept. And one of the most important strengths in this essay is about the 3 recommendations that the authors raised. Authors raised suggest the 3 recommendations initiative to implement the digital partnerships. The first is PinTech, and the second is program, and third is the scholarships. PinTech is recently popular among the financial sector and online. I think that we in Korea we have the Bankasela. I think it's kind of the PinTech, but in order for Korea and ASEAN to implement and strengthen the PinTechs between 2 sides, we need to solve some kind of security issues and other technical issues to develop the PinTechs. So I think for further research, the author need to elaborate and specify how to deal with some kind of the problem, challenge that comes from the PinTech between Korea and ASEAN. But the other 2 recommendations I think is very useful and practical for strengthening cooperation between the ASEAN and ROK regarding the digital partnership, because this kind of the recommendations can develop the capacity building of the digital capacity building of the ASEAN people, and therefore ASEAN and Korea can have the co-development, co-prosperity in the future, in the long terms. So I think 2 remaining recommendations are very I think useful as I focused on, and those are my brief comments on the paper. And now if time available, I would like to raise some questions from YouTube participants. I will give questions to each presenters. And the first presenter regarding the strengthening ASEAN-Korea digital economic cooperation by integrated e-platforms. The question 1, the ASEAN ROK e-marketplace platform you proposed could be an ideal solution to lowering the entry barrier for ASEAN and Korea sellers seeking to make inroads into each other's markets. However, the platform seems to be less appealing to consumers than existing platforms such as Lazada and Coupang, where they can find a wide array of products. In this sense, how would the platform attract consumers and facilitate not only B2B, but also B2C transactions? This is the first question. And second question, the ASEAN-Korea social business e-networking platform could provide adequate networking opportunities between ASEAN and Korean businesses, especially in the pandemic time. However, the credibility of the information on the registered companies would be an issue. How does the platform verify all the information to offer networking opportunities among the reliable companies?
Could we have Yemin or Hok Jae to respond to the questions, please?
Yeah, sure. So with regards to the first question, which how does the integrated like the B2B2C platform could actually appeal to existing consumers? Well, initially the idea was to start from B2B first, so businesses and business collaborate, and when you have connections and as the businesses collaborate more amongst each other, we hope that this would establish a certain brand credibility amongst the consumer base. When you see the stores that you actually often visit are actually having certain cooperation, and that builds some confidence in you, and slowly those business associations might probably attract more and more consumers to the platform, where they could easily locate ASEAN and Korea firms. And also, by concentrating the circle, consumers may be able to discover certain shops they have been unable to discover back in their own platform. And that's what we hope to achieve at a later stage. But initially, the idea was you strengthen the B2B first, and then there comes B2C. Yeah. So, of course, we understand that current e-platforms such as Lazada, Alibaba's main, as well as Coupang, they're already so established. But also, it's good to know that I think South Korea's influence, like we are all riding on a South Korean wave right now, it's pretty established, as well as a lot of local e-platforms are actually incorporating such firms into their own e-platforms. I believe Singapore's, is it Lazada? I think Lazada had opened a special place to allow South Korean firms to merchandise their things, right? Perhaps the integrated e-platform could promote themselves as a platform where you show that we actually have more firms right there for you to. They could probably leverage on that benefit. We actually have more firms than those who actually sign an agreement with local firms. If you want more alternatives, you could probably visit our firms. So I believe that would be the job on marketing, promoting. All this have to come to be factored in as well, we believe. But as for the initial stage, both of us do think that the business to business, probably to promote a little bit more, to link up companies first. So, and then we can probably tie into the SBET right now. So we hope that, probably SBET could facilitate firms to connect with each other. So then let's move on to the next question on how could you ensure the credibility of information? Well, when it comes to e-platforms, e-data e-systems in general, data security, data credibility, they are all issues. So we actually have I think we repeatedly mentioned this in our essays that, well, it requires high regulatory policies. And we looked into the South Korea. South Korea is very established in their e-commerce industry, and we looked into their industries as well. And we realized there are actually several credible policies that have been rolled out. And so we thought if South Korea could bring this perspective into discussion and could even facilitate in the building of such policies, I don't think there will be that great a difficulty in ensuring the credibility of such platforms. There are already so many networking initiatives out there. LinkedIn, if you search it out more, there are even certain e-platforms that are catered for specific industries. But what you can't find is a e-social business networking platform that is catered solely for two countries, for two regions, South Korea and ASEAN. That's what you can't find. And the algorithms make it such that they match you to the user information that is most aligned or associated with what you have provided to the accounts, to the algorithms. So we thought this platform could probably help, and of course this needs to be complemented with all the other data security policy, information checks. Everything needs to come in, but we understand that there requires a lot of work on that. So we would like to take more questions. Is there any? But that's from us right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your detailed answers to the questions. And I would like to give a question to second presenters with the title Digitalization and Trade in Service. The question is that the Korean media reported that the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, so-called RCEP, which was signed in November 2020, entailed lower tariffs for some service sectors such as gaming, animation in the Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. Does your research include the ASEAN-Korea trade in these sectors? Do you see that the signing of RCEP will further facilitate the trade in services between ASEAN and Korea?
Michael, that would be...
Okay, sure. Well, I didn't go to the specifics of the gaming industry, but just knowing what RCEP is, it's really to foster a greater level of trade amongst the, I think 16 or 15, because I think one of the countries like dropped out the last minute, but of those 15 member states that are part of RCEP, it involves new liberalization commitments. So then, like you mentioned, tariffs will be much lower, but it also involves more comprehensive non-tariff agreements also, right? So we have basically all those policies that countries have committed to. So yes, the short answer to the question is yes, definitely it will strengthen trade between Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, in the gaming industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
There are very different, as I said before, and it's similar to my observations. There are very different stages of development in service industries within ASEAN, and digital divide among the ASEAN member states still linger on. As such, one-size-fits-all approach is likely fail for Korea to strengthen the partnership with ASEAN countries in trade in services. In this context, would it be effective to divide ASEAN into several groupings based on the developmental stages and come up with a strategy for each groupings?
Yes, definitely. That's actually one of the points that I have in my paper, but I probably didn't really emphasize that enough in my presentation. But one of the things that I really wanted to bring out was that we could take advantage of the complementarities within the vertical linkage. So probably the more advanced economies can focus on certain things, maybe more strategic level. And then maybe the lesser advanced economies can focus on more operational level. Definitely a much more in-depth study will be required to assign which country to which part of the vertical chain. But yes, there is definitely merit in taking advantage of this complementarity. And that also ties in with one of the results that we have where countries really crowd in certain categories. So because of that crowding, it's much better for them to specialize. So maybe one of the example, because I've already mentioned it anyway already in my case study, is the insurance sector. So maybe we could have like a front office where you have all the product offerings, and maybe another back office where you have all the operational parts of the insurance value chain. Things like those can definitely be studied further.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah. Now, I would like to ask questions to the last presenter in these sessions. And I would like just one question to you. As you pointed out, fintech is an important enabler to further development of the e-commerce. Can you share more about the developmental stages of fintech industries of ASEAN countries? Thank you.
Hi, to answer your question, according to my observation, the level of fintech development is not in the ASEAN countries now is not that fast compared to which in Korea. But like in the long terms, I can see that we can make some changes to somehow manage to pull this off. So the first thing is I think that Korea and ASEAN countries should both consider law and regulations because knowing the standards and regulations of the target country is really crucial to developing a successful product when it comes to fintech. So you need to know what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do since the very beginning. An example would be when it comes to terms and regulation, it's important to mention maybe open banking, which means using open APIs to let a third-party developers create applications for a certain financial institution. So when it comes to this, Korea may have different laws and ASEAN countries may have different laws. So we need to figure out the financial transparency possibilities and change people's attitude towards data ownership to work this out. And not to mention, security is both important in Korea and ASEAN countries. So we really need to prioritize the protection of customer data as our top priority, because we'll have to work with a lot of personal and sensitive data of the users. So laws like maybe security policies like penalizing the employee that doesn't respect the law and regulation when it comes to e-commerce is important. And yeah, I think those kind of things should be considered. And that's all for my part.
Thank you for your answer. We have questions from award winners.
Could you please put your hand up to... Michael, could you please address your question, please?
I just wanted to ask, Professor, what do you think are the key priority areas for the ASEAN-Korea economic partnership?
Sorry, Michael, we couldn't hear you clearly. Could you put your mic and say it again, please? Yes, please.
All right. I wanted to ask Professor what he thinks are the key priority areas for the ASEAN-Korea economic partnership. And maybe if he agrees with where it's heading to right now.
Okay. Besides the digital economic cooperation, as I mentioned before, there is still the development gap in Southeast Asian regions. So I think after reducing the development gap between the mainland ASEAN countries and maritime ASEAN countries, digital gaps can be reduced and improved. So I think for furthering digital economic cooperation between ASEAN and Korea, we need to collaborate between two for improving and developing the digital infrastructures, like you mentioned, digital center, or the building and strengthening capacity for digital skills, and at the same time the physical infrastructure to raise the qualified people with digital knowledge. So I think before making digital development cooperation in realization, we need to cooperate with each other for enhancing digital infrastructure in the less developed countries in ASEAN regions. That's my guess.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Cho, for your insight as well. Now, we would like to move on to our session 2 presentations. And in this session, the presentations will be on the socio-cultural digital partnership between ASEAN and Korea. Now, as for the first speaker of our session 2, I would like to invite Ms. Callista Chong from the University of Oxford. Callista, the screen is yours. All right. Okay, well, while we are waiting for the connections from Singapore, Callista, now we see you here. Okay, the screen is yours, Callista.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Callista from Singapore, and I'm currently studying at the University of Oxford. And today I'll be presenting my paper titled The Defining Decade of Digitalization, New Frontiers in ASEAN-Korea Digital Cooperation. So this will be the brief outline of my presentation. And firstly, I'll delve into the benefits of ASEAN-Korea digital cooperation. Firstly, there's a strong economic case to be made for digital cooperation. Both ASEAN and South Korea share close trading relations, and it is estimated that the ASEAN digital economy will add $1 trillion to a regional GDP over the next decade. And therefore, I believe that a digitally and financially literate ASEAN will spur growth in all 11 countries. Secondly, a digital partnership can also lay a strong foundation for the fulfillment of our political and security objectives in an increasingly bipolar regional environment. Now, ASEAN is a highly diverse region. We have a variety of cultures, languages, and this diversity is also reflected in the unevenness of digital development among ASEAN states. So, the Cisco Digital Readiness Index in 2019 measures a country's stage of digital readiness based on their score and groups them into 3 categories: activate, accelerate, and amplify. And currently, ASEAN members and South Korea are presently divided between the amplify and accelerate stages. And therefore, when we fashion an ASEAN-Korea digital blueprint, we must ensure that each of our member states' priorities are incorporated into an inclusive digital blueprint. In the following section, I will be delving into some of the challenges and opportunities that have emerged from this pandemic. So firstly, COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerability of global supply chains by further disrupting the mobility of people and goods after the volatility sustained by the US-China trade war. However, this also presents opportunities to harness digital technologies to strengthen the resilience of ASEAN and South Korea's supply chains. Firms now recognize the need to adopt automation technologies and optimize processes. Secondly, COVID-19 also threatens to enlarge the digital divide, which is known as the new phase of inequality. This problem is twofold. On one hand, we have a shortage of digital supply in certain countries, such as fiber optic infrastructure and broadband connectivity. And on the other hand, the lack of digital literacy has also led to a weak demand for digital services as well. And this has severe implications for economic recovery and long-term development of human capital. And therefore, I propose a two-pronged approach to digital inclusion that increases both the demand and supply, and we should prioritize this in the post-COVID era. The third point that I wish to make is that COVID has unveiled scalable digital opportunities in the new era, such as telecommuting, e-commerce, and telehealth. We should focus on leveraging these promising sectors to propel growth in the post-COVID era. Last but not least, COVID-19 has arguably posed the biggest test of government's abilities in recent years. Digital governance contributes to a nimble national strategy for combating COVID-19. There is great potential for intergovernmental collaboration in the transition to smart cities and digital public services to improve on crisis management. Now, I will propose 4 areas of cooperation between ASEAN and South Korea. The 4 action areas are sequenced according to their ease of implementation, which I have defined according to the level of political will and estimated economic cost. The first area that I will be delving into would be the digital economy, because they're estimated to incur the least upfront costs and also garner the highest level of political support among governments. What I first propose is that ASEAN and South Korea should deepen digital and technological cooperation in the emerging growth sectors that I've mentioned before. And the first would be in digital consumer services. The region has seen a rise in super apps such as Kakao Talk in South Korea and Grab and Gojek in other Southeast Asian countries. If there can be a cross-fertilization of digital technologies between the conglomerates in ASEAN and South Korea, this would be very beneficial for the development of a thriving ASEAN-Korea digital ecosystem. My second solution is that countries can design initiatives to support e-health innovation, and this can take the form of an ASEAN-Korea Innovation Challenge. Alternatively, telehealth companies can also be invited to present at future iterations of the ASEAN-Korea Innovation Showcase that has been started back in 2019. The next aspect I'll be focusing on would be digital inclusion. And ASEAN has a substantial rural population that suffers from the underutilization of digital technology. And I think that closing the access gap may be important, but more importantly, we should harness the second order effects of skillful digital usage. And this involves harnessing the technologies to actually bring benefit to the communities that are underserved. So what I suggest is that we should implement digital engagement projects in rural communities to promote the sustainable and skillful use of digital technologies. And this can be modeled after South Korea's very successful information network villages, or INVIL in short. These community engagement schemes are useful in imparting the skillful use of digital technologies to rural residents, where they teach them how to set up e-commerce stores or to purchase groceries and other supplies on the web as well. So my second solution would be to prioritize digital literacy through the establishment of a collaborative educational platform between ASEAN and South Korea that is modeled after the European Commission's e-twinning and school education gateway initiatives. So the Ministry of Education in ASEAN and Korea can look into setting up a web-based platforms for educators or volunteers to co-create digital resources for students and training materials for teachers and volunteers to transition to new forms of teaching, such as gamified learning or the use of classroom management portals. So this ground-up approach not only improves the quality and accessibility of educational resources for rural communities, but it also fosters meaningful intercultural exchanges between our countries. And teachers also learn to design their teaching resources in a culturally sensitive manner that appeals to diverse audiences. And I think that in a hyper-digitalized world where mastery of digital technologies has become the prerequisite for a better future, addressing digital inclusion will be a worthwhile investment for governments. On to my third solution. I think that smart cities will bring a lot of benefits to ASEAN states, given the growing climate challenges that we have to address in the new decade, and also to make urban areas more safe and inclusive for us as well. And my suggestion for this area would be to tap on the budding ASEAN-Korea startup ecosystem to develop innovative climate solutions for sustainable urban development. And this builds on the momentum set by the Startup Expo, which featured in the ASEAN-Korea Startup Summit back in 2019. And I feel that such a regional ecosystem can incorporate elements from Singapore's accredited mentor partners scheme, which offers mentoring and training opportunities for aspiring startup entrepreneurs. And these startups should be incorporated as a key partner in smart city development through a regional incubation program, because I feel that they can bring many innovative ideas to the table and complement governmental efforts as well. Last but not least, my final solution would concern the digitization of public services. And I feel that this should be a priority for ASEAN states, even though there may be a bit more difficulty in implementing this in the immediate term. Thus far, I've found that there has been little elaboration on how digital technologies can be incorporated into public sector reform. And what I propose is that we establish an ASEAN-South Korea digital help desk under the United Nations Internet Governance Forum Plus, which was developed to contemplate future models of digital governance. So this regional desk operates in alignment with the UN-wide observatory and help desk, and it will facilitate the sharing of best practices among Korean and ASEAN governments, such as the customization of front-end user experience to the standardization of back-end systems. And I feel that such an initiative could leverage the expertise of other continents because it is incorporated under the larger UN umbrella, but at the same time, it also maintains a focus on the local context and thus maintains a balance of autonomy and alternative perspectives. Now, after diving into these 4 areas of cooperation, I've looked at the acceleration of digital economy by leveraging the momentum of high growth sectors. I've also looked at the fostering of digital inclusion by increasing digital literacy and encouraging the co-creation of educational resources. Thirdly, I've looked at building smart cities by nurturing climate resilient urban solutions. And lastly, I've looked at digitizing the delivery of public services through regular intergovernmental dialogue and mutual assistance. Now, digitalization is undeniably one of our biggest strategic priorities for all countries alike. And I feel that a fruitful partnership in this respect will allow our bilateral relations and multilateral relations to grow from strength to strength. Thank you so much for your attention, and I welcome any questions for me later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Callista, for your presentation. I think it was in line. It opened the session 2 very well, following on from the session 1. Moving on to our next presentation, I would like to invite Nam Hyun-jin from Seoul National University to deliver her team's presentation. Hyunjin, are you connected with us? Okay, we're still waiting for the queue.
Sorry, one moment.
While we are waiting, Callista's paper was we actually considered about putting it in either in the economic part, session 1, or session 2. And I think Callista's paper actually was really nicely introduced, was a linkage between the economy part and the socio-cultural part as you expanded on the horizon of the number of digital corporations that we could make. Okay, I think now our second presentation is ready. I would like to invite Hyunjin to share her team's presentation.
Good afternoon. Sorry for the delay. My name is Hyunjin Nam, and actually I'm from Yonsei University, and my partner is Young-hun Kim, and she's from Seoul National University. And we wrote our paper regarding digital tourism as an area for ASEAN-Korea digital cooperation during and after the COVID pandemic. In our paper, we propose that ASEAN and Korea promote the usage of virtual travel, which includes both 360-degree virtual tours and virtual reality tourism in order to promote socioeconomic exchange. 360-degree virtual tours are a two-dimensional 360-degree visual panorama of their desired destinations, while virtual reality travel, or VR travel, allows individuals in a three-dimensional virtual setting to actually engage with the surrounding environment using audio-visual media in order to offer a more immersive and interactive experience for users. For example, a virtual travel program targeted at the use of ASEAN may include an immersive walk around Gangnam District or a live visual panorama of the streets of Myeongdong in order to expose ASEAN nationals to the vibrant Korean culture. On the other hand, virtual travel also opens up the possibility for individuals to travel to destinations that are difficult to visit, such as off-limit areas for security or unsafe areas from site deterioration. Examples of these may be a virtual tour of the Korean Peninsula's demilitarized zone or the Kakaburaji National Park in Myanmar that are unavailable for physical tour. And moreover, during the COVID-19 pandemic, in which physical travel and tourism is limited, we hope to advocate for the development of virtual tourism. So to begin with, the economic implications of digital tourism. Prior to COVID, tourism had been one of the most rapidly growing economic sectors in the world. In 2017, tourism represented 10.4% of the GDP, while international tourist arrivals reached 1.5 billion worldwide in 2019. However, due to the onset of the COVID-19 era, the tourism industry greatly suffered as countries around the world closed their borders to foreigners and introduced travel restrictions, such as Korea's special travel advisory imposed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that discourages overseas travel. According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, from January to May 2020, there has been 56% less international travelers, resulting in a $320 billion loss in exports from tourism in 5 months. And more specifically, in Asia and the Pacific, displayed the largest wreckage of 72% decrease in international tourist arrivals in the 6-month period. As a result, we propose that ASEAN and the ROK cooperatively develop virtual tourism as an innovative solution to contribute to the accelerated economic recovery of the tourism industry during the fourth industrial revolution. In addition to the economic damage, the social harm caused by COVID-19 is apparent through the emergence of coronavirus blues, which is defined as depression caused by COVID-19, often from prolonged self-isolation or quarantine measures. According to data from the Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare, the number of counseling sessions for anxiety disorders have increased to 18,931 in the first half of 2020, which is a 44.8% increase from the 13,067 cases total previously in 2019. We believe that virtual tourism will provide individuals with a recreational activity or a creative outlet that people in isolation can enjoy from the comfort and privacy of their separate homes and be a distraction from the prolonged stress, whether mental, economic, or physical, caused by COVID-19. Now we'll move on to virtual tourism in the post-pandemic era. In the post-COVID-19 era, virtual tourism can be used as a means of marketing in the rapidly expanding tourism market. In comparison to traditional marketing, where participants are passive observers, virtual tourism enables tourists to make more informed decisions by allowing them to act as participants in a first-hand experience of their destination. The use of virtual tours as marketing strategies can be observed by All Nippon Airways' virtual reality tour of their new business class cabins. During this experience, tourists can virtually enter one of the largest business class seating environments in the world and experience unique features of a cabin, such as opening the cabin doors, ordering food, changing lighting conditions, and watching an in-flight movie. In addition, virtual travel can also be adopted in classrooms as an informative tool to educate students about the cultures of ASEAN and Korea, or accumulate a positive impression of other Southeast Asian countries. Justice Nkahai's empirical study in 2010 on the effectiveness of virtual travel for education revealed that students who engaged in virtual travel to the Forbidden City of China reported higher satisfaction with their learning. Virtual tourism also provides a solution to the unresolved issue of decreasing nations' ecological footprint. According to a previous study on climate change and tourism in 2005, the transport-related CO2 emissions from tourism represented 3.7% of all man-made CO2 emissions, but this has increased to 5% in 2016. Moreover, international tourist arrivals have increased 65% from 2005 to 2016, and based on the measurement of rapid growth of international tourism due to the increased affordability of air travel and technological advancement, transport-related emissions from international tourism are expected to grow 45% from 2016 to 2030. Although increases in transport-related emissions from tourism is curbed by COVID-19, virtual tourism provides a long-term and sustainable solution for the preservation of tourist destinations that will inevitably deteriorate with industry growth. We'll now talk about the expected effects on the ASEAN-Korean relationship. Despite the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic through the implementation of our proposal, we expect that the ASEAN-Korean relationship will continue to be strengthened by emphasizing the welfare and prosperity of the nationals of ASEAN and Korea. Virtual tourism can serve as a solution to the people pillar of President Moon Jae-in's new Southern policy, of which the original goal was 15 million mutual visitors by 2020 annually, and expand cultural exchange through direct people-to-people interaction. Moreover, ASEAN-Korea knowledge sharing regarding the development of virtual tourism technology may also contribute to the creation of a prosperous Southeast Asian community by contributing to the economic recovery of the tourism industry and smart expansion of a burgeoning industry, which will solidify the relationship between ASEAN and Korea to a partnership that can withstand potential changes induced by new administrations or policies. Virtual tourism may also serve a strategic advantage for ASEAN and Korea during the current era in which the strategic and economic rivalry between China and the US intensifies. While South Korea relies heavily on the US as its strongest security ally, China is also South Korea's largest economic partner, placing South Korea in a strategically difficult position, which is similar to many ASEAN countries due to their economic reliance on China. By strengthening economic and socio-cultural ties between Korea and ASEAN countries, both parties may be able to create strategic leverage that will enable the expansion of autonomy and independence from major powers. In conclusion, our paper identifies virtual travel as a potential field of digital cooperation between ASEAN and South Korea during the pandemic era and afterwards that will further strengthen ASEAN-Korea relations. In this era of the fourth industrial revolution, we believe that rapid technological innovation will render virtual tourism inevitable in the future, and that through the adoption of a virtual tourism program, ASEAN and Korea will emerge as global leaders during the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The unexplored opportunities and potential application of virtual tourism in cultural, historical, and scientific studies are limitless. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Hyunjin. And we surely miss tourism, and we miss Southeast Asia a lot. Now, I would like, before we move on to our last speaker, I would like to make the announcement that if you have any questions, please leave them on our YouTube live chat. And for our Zoom participants, please hold on to your questions and let us know later. Now, I would like to invite our last speaker for today's webinar, Ms. Yu Ji-eun from Seoul National University.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm the last presenter, Ji-eun Yu, and I prepared this essay with Byung-jin Choi. The title of our essay is ASEAN-Korea in the post-COVID-19 era, Cooperation in Producing VR Cultural Tourism Content from the Perspective of Digital Humanities. Well, let's get started. So this is our outlines of content. Okay, have you ever been there? They are famous tourist attractions in Korea and ASEAN. But as you know, we can't move due to COVID-19, and the tourism industry around the world, including Korea and ASEAN, has been damaged hard. Especially the countries with a larger proportion of tourism to GDP faced a serious economic crisis. What can we do in a such situation where traveling and face-to-face contact is not possible? We think the role of digital cooperation in tourism industry between Korea and ASEAN is getting more important. As a solution, we suggest VR tourism cooperation, which contains cultural contents of Korea and ASEAN. More specifically, VR tourism can not only complement existing travel methods, but also create new travel trends. And in terms of industrial sustainability, it has many possibilities, as digital New Deal policies are being pursued by Korean government, and ASEAN is also having startup-centric economic growth. We divided cultural content in local and national content and transnational content, and we'll talk about it later. So from this cooperation, we expect sustainable and reciprocal partnership. And we approach this theme from the perspective of digital humanities. There's a lot of interpretation, but briefly it means an interdisciplinary attempt to inherit and extend the themes of traditional humanities by introducing digital technology. And the word space from the viewpoint of digital humanities is the concept, which is possible to discover new cultural values beyond the separating. So through VR technology, we can realize a new cultural space that eliminates the boundaries between reality and virtual world. It has three benefits. First, the enhancement of cultural partnership. We can achieve social and cultural cooperation beyond the political and economic relationship. Second, transition of travel value. After COVID-19, people would decide to travel more carefully, comparing the benefits with costs, and they would pursue more human happiness and meaningful contents in the journey. And lastly, infinite scalability through the combination of media. It can be used for various media, such as games, webtoons, and music videos, creating demands in various fields. So here are two examples of number 3. The first one is the game Bayani from Philippines, which reproduced historical figures such as Jose Rizal, And the second one is the music video Idol of BTS, and it includes Korean cultures such as ancient palace, Taichung, and Hanbok. So this essay suggests cultural content for VR tourism by dividing them into two space types. In the local and national space, we consider distinctive culture of each country, and this type provides opportunity to go into exotic cultural or historical space. In the transnational space, we focus on the cultural similarities shared by each country. For Korea and ASEAN, we can enhance historical understanding and familiarity. And for ASEAN countries, it can promote regional cooperation. So before introducing suggestions, I'm sorry to say that I compressed a lot of content because of time limits, so it may not be sufficient. Please refer to our paper if you want to find out more. So in case of local national space types, I will introduce Angkor Wat tour in Cambodia firstly. You can experience historical events surrounding Angkor Wat like before, but this tour also can compose virtual elements using graphic and sounds such as the character myths and characters on murals. It helps understand overlapped religious characteristics and histories of Angkor Wat. Secondly, a Hindu tour in Indonesia. You can experience continuity of Hinduism in the wide Indonesia. You can go to Jakarta, Yogyakarta, and Bali in succession. During this tour, you can overcome spatial and temporal limits of a short tour. And lastly, time travel in Seoul. Using VR technology, it presents from Japanese colonial era Gyeongsang to contemporary Seoul. It arranges changes of Seoul in consecutive order. Besides, it can reenact Miracle on the Han River as a role model of Miracle on the Mekong. So this tour has symbolic meaning. Let's move on to next. In transnational space types, I'll start by memory experience of independent movements shared by Korea and ASEAN. It produced digital content based on the shared history of colonization. Sodemon Prison History Museum in Korea, Hualo Prison Museum in Vietnam, and Fort Santiago in Philippines can be presented, for instance. Through this content, we can share the pain of colonization and endeavor to achieve independence. Secondly, Confucian culture experience. This content deals with Confucian culture shared between Korea and Vietnam. It can provide comparative analysis and increase mutual understanding of culture. Dosanseon in Korea and Temple of Literature in Vietnam can be an example. And finally, experience of puppet shows. ASEAN has shared the culture of puppet show. There are special puppet shows in Indonesia and Malaysia, water puppetry in Vietnam, and traditional puppet play in Myanmar, and so on. By producing digital content, combining various puppet shows, it can raise realism and vividness of shows. We can also experience the process of performance production by VR. Besides, it will promote ASEAN's regional cooperation and strengthen identity of one ASEAN. So that's all what I want to talk about today. Ultimately, I firmly believe that by promoting VR tourism cooperation based on the digital humanities perspectives, Korea and ASEAN will not only continue a consistent partnership, but also lead the tourism innovation globally in the post-COVID-19 era. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jian. Now that's the end of our 3 presentations for session 2. At this stage, I would like to invite Professor Kim Hyung-jong for his comments and views on the sociocultural digital partnership between ASEAN and Korea. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ha. And first of all, I'd like to congratulations and thank you for your very successful and useful and innovative presentations. So our session is entitled the Social Cultural Partnership. I think that given the state and the situation of the COVID-19, which have given us the very hardship in terms of the political and economic and the social cultural. So it's very timely important topic to think about that how we overcome the current challenges we face, especially and particularly using the digitalizations to promote especially the bilateral relation and cooperation between ASEAN and Korea. So I think your presentations are full of the very innovative suggestions, and which very deserve to attract many the policymakers' attentions. So, as you know and were point out, the crisis driven by the COVID-19 began as a health security issues, but has increasingly become more complex issues, such as political, economies, and more importantly, social cultural issues. And Korea and ASEAN is not the exception from these challenges. So our discussion, then the award-winning and ideas and suggestions should be very useful for promoting and overcoming this crisis and promoting bilateral cooperation between ASEAN-Korea. So I believe also we can expect and utilize this crisis as a kind of the opportunity to expand our friendship and areas of the cooperation in social cultural sectors. So the first presentation and essay by Kalisa Chong, I think certainly this is well executed works and which touches on the digitalizations, and she tried to explain and provide that how the digitalization can contribute promote the ASEAN and Korea's relations, not only as the functional tools, but also as the strategic means. And also it deals with very important issues and areas such as the smart cities and climate resilience and urban solutions, and then delivery of the public services and so on. And also it covers and it touches very important aspect of the digitalization, such as the digital inclusions, and which should come together as an inclusive growth, which becomes a core elements of the sustainable development for today. But I may suggest some points. So actually, you all deserve to be celebrated here, and not to be advised by me. But as a reader, I may share some opinions with you. So considering your title of the essays and presentation, I think it might be useful if you can provide the conceptual explanations on that digitization and digitalization and digital transformation. So as you know that, you assume that all of the leaders know that, but it is very important to differentiate the critical junctures which can be differ from the previous eras. Through that, the COVID-19, we are entering to the somehow unprecedented the new normal. So it is important how we define, as you mentioned in your title, how we define, how we understand the changing aspect of these eras. So digitization is certainly the simplest kind of the conversion of the analog data to the digital data, and digitalization is kind of the innovative business models and so on. But as the keynote speaker mentioned in previous session, the digital transformation doesn't not only rely on the technological developments. It may cover the very wide spectrum, even from the everydays of our lives to the social and then personal relations, and even the governance and so on. So I refer to the title of the essay. So I may expect a kind of the emphasis on that conceptualization of the critical changing moments and junctures. And also there are some issues maybe you can consider that there are some the terminologies we use commonly, but there might be the different understanding, such as the telemedicines and the smart cities. In Korea, so many actors and stakeholders, they may have the different ideas on this the same terminology. So what is important to hear is that we know that it carries the very great potential to be if it is realized or materialized commercially, and also not only in terms of the business interest, but also it can give some kind of the benefit for the marginalized groups and vulnerable groups. But when you talk about this kind of the partnership and cooperation, but there are some different understanding of the same terminology. So you need to emphasize that the kind of the possible differences between the ASEAN, even Korea, even within the Korea and so on. And also you give some very practical suggestions that you drew from that, based on some lessons drawn from the case studies. But the important thing is that under what conditions and those suggestions can be implemented. So I know that given the limitation of this essay, the length, it's not the first, but with the same model cannot be implemented unconditionally. For example, as you mentioned, that the information network village projects in Korea. So after more than 10 years, there are some fluctuations in terms of the implementation of the projects. Despite the earlier successful story of this project, now we observe that some kind of the downturn or some weakness, and actually the number of the entitled the information network village has decreased. So important thing is that still we can draw some point and ideas which can develop further, but important question should be given on that, under what conditions. So that is my question and the point I want to share with you. And second and third question by Nam Hyun-jin and Young Hyun and Yoo Ji-eun and Choi Myung-jin. Also, I should confess that it's very innovative and full of the ideas, and there's no surprise if it is immediately materialized or adopted by the policymakers. So I think this is very practical in that sense, and also not only the practical ideas, but it is possible because you have understood the previous cooperations and the current state of the ASEAN-Korea's cooperation in these sectors. So I may give some comment. The two essays together, because these two essays and the works, the relations are actually complementary. So it is very useful to read these two essays together. So the first, Nam Hyun-jin and Young Hyun's essay, so it deals with the economic aspect of the virtual tourism, and also it also highlights that some aspect of the strategic means for the implementation of the New Southern policies, and it will persuade and explain why the virtual tourism is important, and then how it practically contributes to bilateral cooperation in many sense. And at the same time, also the third presentation, you and Choi, look at the virtual tourism and usefulness and its the possible implication. Somehow interesting thing is that they look at this from a digital humanity perspectives. So it highlights that the virtual tourism as a new spaces for the creating new type of the interaction. So I think it is certainly very important implication and notion of while we think about the digitalizations. And also it carries some very practical suggestion and ideas. The programs such as the sharing independence, the histories, and the similarity Confucianisms between the Vietnam and Korea, and then traditional shadow plays and so on. So I think it was certainly the very enjoyable work to read, but I'd like to share some point. what I found is the common approaches from these two essays, the second and third essay. So they approach the digitalization, especially the virtual tourism, from a perspective of the commercialization. So, but what the here lacking point here is the social dimension. So, if you look at the realities, the tourism sectors is one of the sectors that severely damaged by the COVID-19, especially in Southeast Asia, ASEAN, and Korea. So, majority of the employees in these sectors are considered as a kind of the vulnerable groups in terms of their incomes, and also a great majority of them are the women, so which expected enlarges and the inequalities in terms of the genders. So in that sense, so I may question on that, especially the second presenters, how you eventually consider the nature of the virtual tourism and or its relation to the face-to-face tourism. Of course, I think that you suggest it is as an complementary means, given the very abnormal the situation created by the COVID-19. But our question is that whose interest matters? Who should be the benefited from this kind of the advanced technologies, the kind of the VRs and so on. So to what extent we can bring some benefit or a kind of the protection for those suffering from this the COVID-19 stage. So that kind of consideration might be added to improve your essay. And second thing is the strategic advantage. As you mentioned that you have mentioned that the contending rivalry between the U.S. and China, but to what extent, it's not clear that to what extent we can expect that the virtual tourism can contribute to ease these tensions in terms of the strategic concerns. So that is thing. And then if you tap that the potential commercialization, I think that is one of the strong point of these two essays. So that's why we pay attention. But we should also admit that there are not only South Korea and ASEAN, there are many global levels of players in these sectors. So when it comes to commercialization, so there must be a certain condition. To what condition? Or to fully commercialize not only the actors in the market, but also government. What role should be played by the government? That kind of the concern also need to be tapped it. Because you know that Amazon, like Amazon, that the great players and the platform providers, they also already started to look at the potential the commercialization of the VR to as an alternative the income source for the tourism sectors. So in this sense, so how if we fully focus on the private sector's commercialization, to what extent we can compete with these global sectors? Otherwise, we may focus on that somehow educational and then for the purpose of the public interactions with a certain level of the government's engagement and support and so on. So here, what I want to suggest is that we need to pay more attention on the social dimensions. So actually the cultural exchange and the mutual understanding between the ASEAN and Korea, that is a great starting point for the further social solidarities, which is urgently need to overcome the common challenges and so on. So in that sense, third presentation essay, which tried to understand digitalization from a perspective of the digital humanities. So I think that you may explore further the possible meaning of the digitalization. Not even you can say that the new meaning of the space. So you can think about that. If we can create the space in online, so we can promote and nurture that a kind of the common identity, so which it can grow somehow the very possible in long term kind of the digital citizenship, which can be shared by the people and youth in both regions, ASEAN and Korea. So in general and overall, I should say again, I very much enjoyed reading your very wonderful essay and presentation. I may stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. Now, we would like to proceed to the Q&A session. For those of you who are on Zoom, if you have any questions, please raise your hand while we collect the questions from YouTube.
Okay. Right. So while the other friends think about their questions, I may raise some questions. So I have the 3 questions to each presenters. So first, so I think you have mentioned about that, rightly mentioned that there are the gaps among the ASEAN member countries. So in your opinion, how can Korea find that appropriate areas of the digital cooperation that encompass ASEAN as a whole? So that is not only the individual countries and the Korea, ASEAN as a whole. That's the first question to the first presenters. I may give the second question to the second presenters. So I think I mentioned these things that while I try to give the right comment just now. So while the virtual tourism may satisfy those who earn for tourism, in what way can virtual tourism bring economic benefit to the local who have stuck by the loss of the income, especially recent the season and caused by the COVID-19? And third question goes to third presenters. And I think given your topics, you have mentioned about that somehow educational, the purpose and use of the virtual tourism. So in what sense you can promote these contents to appeal to the public? How would it be promoted? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kim. I think we'll start with Callista with the question that was directed to you.
Sure, thank you. So firstly, I would like to thank the professor for asking this question. It's a very thoughtful one and something that I kept in mind throughout the entire process of research and writing, because I hope to present solutions that are inclusive for all ASEAN member states and South Korea included, given the digital unevenness in the region. So I think that solutions that I've presented in my presentation have the capacity to include all of the nations. So I'm going to focus firstly on the digital inclusion projects. So I think perhaps more digitally developed countries such as South Korea and Singapore can perhaps convene a task force where we work in partnership with countries who would like to have these projects implemented in their countries or in specific communities. And we can convene this task force to think through the logistics and think through the programs that we can implement in these areas. Earlier, you've mentioned that it would be very important to kind of pinpoint the specific conditions under which initiatives like INVIL or Go Digital ASEAN, for instance, can be incorporated into to these rural communities. And I do think that this is a very important process that we must think through very carefully before we start embarking on these community engagement projects, because we want to be respectful to the communities that we extend our assistance to as well. So I think only through frequent dialogue among ASEAN and South Korea can we reach a conclusion that is fruitful and that satisfies the needs of all member states. I think for the digital economy aspect, notably, there are certain countries with very developed startups, whereas other countries might be still building their regional startup ecosystem and so on. But I think that for my solutions with regards to the digital economy, my suggestion to actually encourage cross-fertilization among the huge conglomerates in Southeast Asia and South Korea is certainly doable with the government's encouragement and facilitation. So I think that should ensure that all ASEAN states are included in this discussion and in this conversation as well. I think the most important thing that I would like to emphasize in my paper as well would be the continued intergovernmental dialogue, which I encouraged by setting up the ASEAN-Korea Help Desk under the UN auspices. If the UN observatory desk does not get implemented in the next few years, it is completely all right to keep these discussions within our regular meetings between ASEAN and South Korea nevertheless, because I think that only through intergovernmental dialogue can we figure out how we can actually draft a fruitful and productive blueprint that will take our cooperation to the next level in the coming decade. So thank you for your question, and I hope that answers your question well.
Thank you, Callista. There were questions to other presenters as well. Who is ready? Okay, I think let's go with Hyunjin and Young.
Sorry. Thank you for your comments on our essay. And we wanted to answer to your question that we think the socio and economic benefits through virtual tourism is more like a chain of events. So we think that, first of all, it's in the interest of low income people, because people who don't have affordability, can't afford traveling to international destinations, will have an opportunity to have access to travel through virtual tourism domestically. But we also think the process is that by using commercializations of virtual tours as a marketing method, this will benefit the currently existing tourism industry, particularly between ASEAN and ROK, by promoting a positive view between these ASEAN nations and the ROK. And by promoting a positive view of each other's culture, the interest in one another's culture will increase, and therefore the interest to actually physically visit these countries will increase, and that will help to the tourism industry to grow between these countries. And by doing so, the tourist industry will remain, it will continue to grow. And by sustaining the growth of the tourist industry, we think that as the majority of the workforce employed by the tourist industry is women and low income people, it will help by growing the industry. It'll also affect positively the people who are employed by the industry. And in addition to that, we think by using this solution, it'll preserve the environment that is necessary to make the tourist industry that it is right now. For example, in the past, Boracay, which is an island in the Philippines, was temporarily closed due to pollution on the island. But in this case, if we're to use a more sustainable solution, such as virtual tourism, there won't be a period where it would have to be completely closed, but that industry can continue and therefore improve the livelihood of the people who are employed by the tourist industry.
And in addition, I would also like to add, by responding to your comment on how much the government can be involved in this process of developing VR tour technology. So we believe that considering the huge economic benefits that this technology holds, it is inevitable that the private sector, like companies, will be interested in developing this technology. And in order for this technology to directly help the socially disadvantaged classes and the lower income classes, we believe that government subsidiaries to these companies can directly help these socially disadvantaged classes. So by this I mean that if the government provides subsidiaries for companies that provide VR service to public schools or socially disadvantaged classes, we think that so the educational sector, as well as people, as as Hyunjin mentioned, people who don't have the money to physically go abroad can get access to this technology as well. So in short, government subsidiaries will play a part in the dissemination of this technology among the socially disadvantaged class. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Hyunjin and Yanghwan. Now I think our last question, another question was directed at Jiun.
Okay. Thank you for your question about how to promote our content to public. And the first answer is that our content can appeal to people who are interested in history and culture. For example, we visited the museum before and we experienced the content reenacting the era of Goguryeo and its myths, and it was really interesting. And secondly, as I said in my presentation, it can be used for various media, such as games and webtoons and music videos and so on. And it can be attract to many people, not just for educational or academic purpose. And later, it can expand its popularity by combining with and it can be expand by mouth to mouth, and we can effectively promote VR tourism and its educational effect by government. And using connection to government, it can be applied to in the educational fields. And for example, there is an example that in the about Andong Hae and this is applied into the Korea's elementary school educational fields. And using this, we can combine these to our content. And I hope this is answer to your question.
Right, thank you for your answers and explanation. So before end, I'd like to deliver the one questions posted by the YouTube participants to the third presenters. So the question is that how you differentiate your virtual tourisms from the uploaded by the travel YouTubers, or could they go hand in hand in more harmonious manners? So what do you think about this?
I think the biggest difference with YouTube is our suggestion is providing direct experience for the tourists who want to directly experience the culture and history of ASEAN and Korea. And as we focused on the digital humanities, not just the field of digital, we want to unify and harmonize the culture and history of ASEAN and Korea. So we thought that the base of our cooperation, sincere mutual cooperation, is based on mutual understanding of the culture and history of each other. So we want to make connection, strengthen the connection between the ROK and ASEAN culture. And also we want to strengthen the unification of the regional cooperation in ASEAN. So the reason why we suggest the VR tourism content, not just the VR tourism, is that we want to make more connection between ASEAN and ROK. So yeah, I hope this would answer to your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Myungjin, as well for your answers. Now, this wraps up the ASEAN-Korea Youth Academic Webinar held online for the first time. Again, thank you very much to all of our supporters and also our speakers who have joined us today. Now, one household announcement is that for those of us on YouTube and for all participants, we have a survey to fill in on our YouTube live chat. So please find the link in the YouTube live chat and fill out the survey, and you'll be in the draw to win coffee coupons as well. So please let us know what you thought about today's event and also win some gifts as well. Now, and of course, lastly, please also follow us on our Facebook, our YouTube, Instagram, and we would like to see you again in our future events. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you in our future events. Stay tuned for AKC events. Bye, everyone. Okay, guys, you can stop waving now. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Okay, all right, guys. Thank you very much all for joining us today. And I mean, okay. Okay. Hi, guys. Can you see me?